our agenda for today. And I am so sorry for those who are listening virtually. I just gave a quick introduction, but we'll go over our outcomes, our norms. We'll have a little bit of a community connector. I'm gonna give you guys a crash course in communication and conflict management, and then give you some time to think about your own practice and how this could be applicable. For me, a game changer in this work and in my role, I actually participated in a program. It was a master's program called Negotiation, Conflict Resolution, and Peace Building. And that information and that understanding and that knowledge, I was able to add that to my toolkit. And so when I'm managing people to try to do the equity work, I had a different skill set. And so that, again, is something that I offer to you when we think about, how do we change outcomes for kids? It really is really practicing that skill set to get to that long-term goal. And then we'll end with an evaluation if we have time. So again, you'll learn some key leadership strategies. Any leaders in here? Everybody in here is a leader. That's number one. I'll say that first, okay? Anyone have a leadership title? Okay. All right, let me just. And I have 24 on chat. So folks on chat, if you guys would throw in the chat what your titles are, or a live stream. All right, let me hear what your role is. Awesome. Lead occupational therapist. Thank you. Principal. Awesome. Of a high school. All right, we got that in common. My battle scars is being covered by my jacket. Program coordinator for school district. Thank you. Anyone else? Teachers, counselors, and we see hands. Teachers, awesome. All right, so there'll be some food for thought. There's a lot of leadership thinking and strategies in here, but I think there'll still be a lot of things that you can hear and learn, and just it'll be universal to what you're doing. So we'll do some active listening. I think we all. Awesome. So we got some folks in the house online. I'm going to have to figure this out. I got to do it the hybrid way, so you guys bear with me on that. But you'll learn some active listening strategies, and then again, strategies for building inclusive school communities. And I think that's definitely where we all can agree to where we want. Norms, we'll keep it simple. It's interactive. That's why I had you guys kind of sit in pairs. I want you to be able to apply it to your practice. And then if you guys are familiar with Brene Brown, she talks about getting ready to rumble. And one of the quotes that she says that I really love, she says, "It's not fear that gets in the way of courage, it's armor." And I like that because particularly when we're in groups like this, we're all educators. We're all, supposed to know and have the answers. And so sometimes when we get in spaces like this, we have to kind of make sure we show up in that way. And I think the whole point of professional development and workshop is that we can be a little bit more vulnerable and, again, just add to our toolkit so that we continue to grow. So get ready to rumble. That will be our norm for today. So what you have on your tables, all of you, and for the folks who are virtual, you don't have these, but we're going to do a community connector, just an M&M game. I actually got it from my second grade teacher, so this is how much of an impression it had on me. But you're going to open up your bag. You're going to count the pieces of candy that you have, okay? Just count total. And then I'm going to ask you to count how many yellow and red M&Ms you have. Okay, we'll start there. You got 0? Oh no, I gotta give you a different bag. All right, this is the pandemic way to play this connector. All right, with your partner, based on the number that you counted, you're gonna introduce yourself and you're gonna share that many things with your neighbor, okay? So if you have 5 yellow and reds, you'll share 5 things about yourself. If you have 3, you'll share 3 things about yourself, and I'll give you guys about 3-4 minutes to share. So go ahead and go, and if you are online, just hang tight, but it's a pretty cool community connector, one way to kind of break the ice. All right, I'm gonna bring us back together. You'll have more opportunities to speak with one another. But one of the things I like to do is just as a part of a workshop is just to model best practices, right? You guys are teachers, you guys are teacher leaders, you're in different positions, but just creating community. So when I think about like what leaders need to do to make it right, like what are the environments that we're setting up? What are the conditions that we're setting up? How are we being intentional about establishing community in our schools and in our classrooms? And so simple things like this, whether you're running a family meeting, whether you're running a staff meeting, whether you're doing something with your kiddos, every single day there should be some kind of connector. We used to call them community connectors, just as a ritual, right? Because again, it's so much going on, and we're going to get into that. But everybody in this room realizes, the impact that the pandemic has had on our schools and our organizations and on our kiddos. And so how can we be intentional about establishing that community? You guys may not have noticed, but people were smiling, people were laughing, checking on your phone. And so those are some of the observations. You do this with 30 people in the room, the place goes crazy, right? It's just loud and people are engaged. And so that's strategy number one, okay? Be intentional about establishing community. And that's something that I really, really, truly, truly believe in. The other thing I believe in is mindful moments and just kind of setting the context, anchoring essentially what you're going to talk about. And so for today's purposes, we're going to talk about how did the pandemic affect your leadership, or you can switch that up, affect you in your role, right? And then how did it impact either your personal life or your professional life? And then with these things in mind, what are you grateful for? What were you challenged by, or what are you still challenged by? Okay, so same partner, give you guys about 3 minutes to share. All right, is there any brave souls in here? Maybe one person want to say something they're grateful for, and one person want to say something they may have been challenged by. Something you're grateful for. Post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, in the pandemic. Anyone want to share anything they're grateful for? We can stay on the positive side. Anything? Yes. Right. So appreciating the family time that you didn't used to have. I think there was a hand back here. Awesome. So what was said for the folks who are participating virtually, just appreciating the learning of how to see it from other people's perspective. I heard empathy, just because so much was going on and impacting people in so many different ways. It improved or enlarged kind of your perspective as a leader. Thank you. Awesome. Yes. Awesome. Awesome. So daily contact, and as a result, those relationships have sustained even as we've come forward. And then we have someone on the chat. What did they say?
Here, it made me see value in things I didn't see before or do to that degree, and vice versa from Adriana. And from Laura, she says, I feel gratitude for a team to collaborate with. I feel challenged by having the time needed to collaborate, and health, enthusiasm, and hope.
Thank you for that collaboration. How many of y'all can relate to that? Because it was no way to get through remote learning, hybrid learning, distance learning. We even had debates about what we were going to call it, right? We needed to collaborate. And so, absolutely, that's something that we could be grateful for. Anyone want to share anything they may have been challenged by or continue to be challenged by? Access. Yeah. Yeah, that was front and center. We saw people's real situation at home. It was no longer on the theory or on the stat sheet. It was like we could see in people's rooms and houses, how people lived, and we understand how that can contribute, positively or sometimes negatively to student outcomes. So thank you guys for that. And again, second note, first note is community, and I'm moving quick because we got a short amount of time together, but really being intentional about establishing community. The second thing when we talk about leaders making it right is really anchoring. People come into our spaces carrying things. And so for me, the essence of a mindful moment is, how do you create a prompt? How do you create, again, and it doesn't have to take long. We've done this for 7 minutes and did kind of two things, right? But really acknowledging that people are coming in and carrying things. I've seen elementary classrooms, the smiley faces, like, where are you today? The smiley face, the sad face, the happy face, right? But the same is true even for adults, right? And so again, taking the time to be mindful of that. I appreciate the principal here in the back of the room saying, like, I had to. I no longer had a choice. I had to consider the perspectives of a lot of different people based on what was going on. And so again, mindful moments is a strategy that helps make it right in our schools. So what I consult around, I've kind of termed restorative school leadership. And so we've all probably heard of restorative practices. And so my belief is the same thing that we do with kids is also necessary for adults and our staffs and our peers. And I'm gonna paint that thesis momentarily about why it's so important for us to be restorative leaders. And so essentially, just to make it quick, it's really the art of integrating emotional intelligence, the art of integrating communication, and then conflict management skills. I like to summarize it in that ability, like, we push and we pamper, right? I was a principal that I was pushing because it was so many equity issues. I was sharing with one of our participants today that I did the work of moving from, kind of segregated special education into full inclusion at a high school. And so I got a lot of battle scars, okay, from that work. But if we're really going to be about equity, it's going to require that. It's going to require that type of action. And so how do we push our people but pamper? The same is true if you're in a teaching capacity. How do we push our students? We do not drop the bar for students. Pamper them, right? That's that relational aspect to pull the best out of them. And so that's kind of what I've termed as restorative school leadership. And so when I look at this screen, I'm dizzy looking at it, right? But these are all the things that we've always dealt with in education. No matter what role you're in, you're probably impacted in some kind of way. Technology, we had COVID, we had mental health off the hook, we had to manage Zoom, curriculum, English learners. Like, how do we do it? Everybody in here is an angel. That's, I believe, how we do it, okay? And I think educators are the most creative people on the planet. That is the only way that we can manage this. And obviously, the pandemic just really exacerbated, and folks were at their breaking in. And I think some folks are still there. But when we think about working conditions, when we think about the things that become stressors, when we think about the conflict that inevitably shows up in our roles, right? It's because of all that stuff, right? It's all that stuff that's just surrounding us. So your mindful moments, you're kind of, bringing it into the space. Your community building helps to kind of, it doesn't take it away, but it sends this message that we're in this together. And I think that's very, very important in our roles as leaders. So it only becomes harmful, right? Conflict is okay, but it's when it becomes harmful that conflict is a problem. A lot of us were taught, we were socialized to try to avoid conflict, but really conflict can sometimes be that vehicle that pushes the organization forward. It can push your relationships forward with students. So at your tables, what conflict presented itself in your school community in the pandemic or in the kind of the post-pandemic that we're currently living in, okay? I'll give you about 2 minutes to talk about it at your tables, and then you can drop it in the chat for those who are live streaming with us. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna pull us together. I wanna hear from our live stream audience. If you wanna share out what you are seeing here.
There's a comment saying challenged by systems that create barriers to inclusion.
Challenge systems that cause barriers to inclusion. Let me hear from this group. This group was going, they was rolling, this front group. What did you guys say? Give me one thing.
So I work in a high school, and I just wanted to say, like, I think students had so much unstructured time when they're in the pandemic, and for us to expect them to have extremely structured days is really hard because they used to be able to go on their phones as much as they wanted. They used to be able to do whatever they want whenever they wanted, and now we're here saying, okay, at this time and this time, you need to focus on math or science or English, and it's really difficult because to make that transition, they didn't really expect it, and now they're, I think, still struggling, and so we're still trying to work through that.
Thank you. So I think you all heard on the live stream, but just from unstructured time to structured time, and everything is accounted for. Anyone else? A new challenge or new problem pop up in your community? So access to technology, the barrier of dealing with the age group and developmental, and basically kind of where the district put their priority as far as resources. Got it. All right, we have one more response. We'll run one more from the live stream.
Okay. Varied responses to distance learning. Some students thrived, some really struggled.
Some thrived, some struggled. And so, again, if we had more time, we could really get into the depths of this. But not only is it impacting our students, and we're going to see that, momentarily, but we do understand, again, all of us are in this work. We have our sleeves rolled up, we are on the ground, right? This is what's happening to the adults in our organizations. And so, this was a study they did in 2020. And so, the gray line is from 17-18. Stress and disappointments aren't worth it, 28%. By 2020, it was up to 42%. I don't seem to have as much enthusiasm now as I did when I began teaching. 45% up to 63%. 35% up to 58% said if I could get a higher paying job, I leave education as soon as possible. And so I'm saying this to really set the context of why we need each other, why we need restorative leadership, why we have to be conscious of everything that we're doing, because this is the long-term impact. And for those of us that are committed, we will probably die as educators. You'll be subbing in somebody's classroom pretty soon, okay? If we don't find a way to retain and create these environments that hold on to people, that care for people, that care for the students, that care for the families, obviously to the best of our ability. Some of the examples you guys used were with students. So this is a parent perception study that they did with parents as a result. And so you guys are seeing this every day, right? You're at schools, you guys know this firsthand. Anxiety is up. Depression is up, sleep issues, withdrawal, and I think aggressive behavior, this one might be on the lower end because all my friends who are working at sites, this is what they're dealing with all day long. And it goes back to the point you made about unstructured to structured time. And so again, I'm kind of painting the story as why these strategies are so important. This is a slide quickly. It just shows from 2020, which is right here, the decreased enrollment. This is up and down the state of California. We are losing enrollment. Where are people going? We don't really know. Some people say Texas. There have been some stories that have debunked that, right? Where are our kids going? Well, everybody in here who's a leader or been, at a board meeting or know that enrollment is tied to a lot of different things, right? Salaries, resources. It's just connected. And so when we lose kids, our districts, our schools sometimes lose resources. And so again, why is restorative leadership important? Why is conscious communication important? Why is our role in that important? Is because of these are the kind of the long-term impacts of us not being intentional about it. So this is the crash course. It's no way you're gonna learn all this. It took me about 3 years in a program to learn this one sentence, okay? But basically, problems are gonna show up. Like I said, I showed you that chart All of us, classroom teachers, site administrator, district administrator, therapist, it's going to show up in some kind of way. And so the path forward is really being conscious of these 4 areas. Do you know who your people are? Are you really clear on the problem potentially you're trying to solve? Is there a process in place? And what product are we ultimately after? Some of us, we know the people and we know the problem. We have no process in mind of moving forward. We definitely don't know the answer. Some folks, I was like, I know the people, I know the problem, and I got the product. As a leader, I personally, this is my own confession, I had to grow in my skill set around developing processes to make people feel like they had a voice. If I'm a classroom teacher, who's that kid who's just like always on the out? Like, what process do we have to kind of make that student feel included, right? Because kids come, as I just said earlier, people come in already carrying something, already labeled, right? If you're a classroom teacher, this kid reads slower or gets pulled out, so all the kids are looking at the other kid get pulled out, right? And so there are a lot of stigmas that we carry. But as leaders, no matter which role you have, you need to be operating in kind of all of these quadrants. So I call these the 4 Ps, right? Being conscious of these 4 Ps. Most importantly, and I'm gonna talk to the principal for a second, right? In the back of the room, that big E word, emotions, right, is huge. And so in our roles as leaders, we have to be conscious, right, that this is what we're dealing with. What are people's communication styles, conflict styles? What's the environment, the cultural environment, the political environment? We definitely saw firsthand during the pandemic how divisive and how divided our communities got, right? Well, why them? Or I had at a school, they said, well, the classified staff need to go down there and distribute the computers. And this is the teacher saying this to me. And I said, well, what's the difference value in their health over your health? You know what I mean? And I had to like really make a stance to say we are all dealing with the pandemic. We all are at risk for, different health concerns. I'm not going to send them in just because they're classified staff. But those types of issues came up because it was like, protect me, protect me, protect me. That's just an example, right? But as leaders, as teachers, what are the emotions that you're having to deal with as you attempt to be strategic about these 4 Ps? So these are the questions I like to ask. You can mix these up. These don't have to necessarily be connected to the pandemic, but who is or is impacted in your organization by the pandemic or another problem that you're dealing with? Who are your people, okay? Which problem is high leverage? Anybody who runs a school or sits on these committees know there are many problems that need to be solved in our schools, right? This is the inclusion conference. Maybe your interest is around expanding inclusion, expanding co-teaching, expanding, kids not having to be pulled out. We want to push in instead of a pull out, right? Like there are all these different problems. What is the most high leverage one that you can spend your energy around? My answer is, where is the energy of the group in your school, right? Because I might have this as my favorite, but that might, 3 other people have another kind of favorite. What can people kind of huddle up around to go after? That becomes the highest leverage problem you can solve. I have many anecdotes that I could tell, but just in the interest of time, I won't. The next one is what process? What process will you put in place to restore community with all stakeholders? That could be your parents, your students, your staff. So basically, what is your process, right? And then the product is, how does the resolution, how is it reflective of inclusive and a collaborative process to address unmet needs? So these are the 4 zones, okay? Classroom teacher or leader on campus that you should be working with. And we'll come back to this. I'm going to have to go through this quickly, but when we think about problems, we tend to kind of shy away, and only the strong kind of lean into the problems, right? You got to have some tough skin. And so what I want to just encourage you with is, when problems show up or when conflict shows up at your school, small, medium, or high, it's really camouflage for unmet needs, right? So when that teacher is rolling her neck, or when that, that parent comes in and throws papers on your desk, or someone is upset, what we have to be equipped with as school leaders is really like looking past that and being in search of the need that potentially is going unmet. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. This one is tough. Is my little thing working? Oh, it's not working. So normally this little gif is like this little girl. You see her little face. Anybody know that person? Is that person on your staff? She's like shaking the cone, like, ah. Is that person on your staff? I had a couple. I've known a lot of those people, right? Over the course of my time. This person is on everybody's staff, okay? So let me give you some strategies. Remember, we said we was gonna make this practical, okay? What do school leaders need to do to make it right? This one is hard. This one says that person, even though that person is a thorn in everybody's side, probably has a nugget of truth, a nugget of wisdom, something in what this person is saying or complaining about. There's probably something to it. Even the kid in your classroom who drives you crazy, it's probably something that if I can find a way to include that person, right? Now, I didn't say give them the mic at a staff meeting, okay? But they have this concept. It's a conflict resolution term, but they call it shuttle diplomacy. And basically, it's the meeting before the meeting, right? So if I'm an adult working with other adults and it's someone who's kind of that person, right? You kind of you have the meeting before the meeting so they don't blow up your meeting, right? If you are a teacher, you're working with a student, you know, Michael was he comes first to mind, right, when I was a teacher. I know that Michael's gonna be off the hook. So before Michael goes into class, like, let me talk to you. How was your day? How you doing? I'm gonna need you to do this. We're gonna get into that. You're just kind of prearranging, right, before things kind of go off course. And so it says inclusive conflict consciously seeks the participation of the most contentious person. Ooh, wow, right? We run from these people, right? You don't see them. You're like, I don't see you in the lunchroom, right? But strategically, when we're trying to make things right, we have to be thinking about our marginalized voices, whether it's the staff, it's the students, or even families. How are we pulling them in, okay? We cannot run away from it. We have to essentially increase our skill set. So one thing I hope you get out of today is when we're thinking about problems or conflicts, I want you to reframe, and I want you to see a problem or a conflict as a hope for the future. So these meetings run too long. What are they really saying? What's the need that's going unmet, right? I don't want to turn in this homework. I had a kid, this was probably just a month ago. He said, why would I do homework? I have given you my time already. I went to school, right? So this concept of like unstructured to structured now, the kid literally believes he was not laughing, he was not joking. He said, why would I do homework? I have given you the time that I'm gonna give school, like during the day. And when I go home, it's my time, right? So this is the mindset, that we're working with. And so how do we skillfully adjust and kind of peer through that to get to some possible resolutions? And then again, when people present concerns, it's really a vision for what they would rather see. Okay, so those are two nuggets just kind of hold on to as we go through. So I want you to think about a problem you're dealing with. This is the application part. Think about a complaint you may have recently heard. If you can't think of anything, I just want you to open up your email. It'll be a problem right there at the top of your inbox, right? It's gonna be a problem, I guarantee, okay? So think about if you reframed the problem and you reframed it as a way to identify unmet needs, what would shift? Like, what would shift in your thinking if you addressed it as an unmet need, okay? So take about 45 seconds. I want you to think about a problem quietly, and then I'll give you time to share with your partner again. All right, go ahead. Awesome, thank you. So those who are live streaming, we had a participant just talk about the power of this process and making sure before decisions are made, people feel like there's buy-in or they've had time at the table to kind of share their piece. She said way more than that, but that's my summary of what she said. But thank you. It is critical, and you might have taken one of my workshops before, because that's definitely like what I consult on, is that exact piece, and I go into a lot more detail with that. And so I want you to, again, be thinking about how do we reframe the problem. Johnny always comes and puts his head down. What is the unmet need? This teacher sits in the back of my staff meetings and knits. These are all true anecdotes, by the way. What is the unmet need? So to change the game, simply put, we change the frame. We change us, because we can't necessarily change them. right? And so it encourages perspective taking. You said that earlier, this, when we started out, it initiates a common ground, right? You put yourself, you take away the hierarchy and you just become kind of a collaborator in that. It enhances the desirability of options. It reduces tension. So when we reframe, we start to depersonalize it, right? I've had students send me over the edge because I was triggered, I was riled up, right? But when you reframe it, your brain has this magical way of slowing down. You even use different words to describe a problem when you've reframed it as unmet needs. Your whole vocabulary changes. And I find that like fascinating. If we had more time, we would go into that. But there's this book, if you guys are interested, it's called Words That Change Minds. It's by Shelley Rose. Shelley C. Rose, spelled with an E, Shelle. Last name is Rose, but the title of her book is Words That Change Minds. These types of things matter, and it will automatically change our language. Another real practical strategy, and you just said this, is the art of active listening. I don't care if it's a student, a parent, a staff, an adult. This even works in your personal relationships, all right? So this one crosses all boundaries, all right? So if you get nothing else, you're going to get something out of this, okay? When we typically are listening to people, we are listening for facts. Like what happened? When did it happen? Why did it happen? Rarely, and this is the emotional intelligence side, right? When we're developing kind of our EQ, we're now in search of kind of the feelings or kind of what's underneath it. Someone generally is communicating, but they're also communicating a lot of things non-verbally, right? What does the body language say? So we can see only outside, we can only see behaviors. We don't know necessarily what they're thinking or necessarily what they're feeling. And so in our roles, again, whether we're a teacher or an administrator, we have to articulate and we have to try to pull out, right, what is underneath, because then you're going to be able to make a connection, right? So then when you're talking about what the final product is or what you guys are going to do to solve it, you've already made that kind of connection, that more relational connection. And so when you're active listening, I challenge everybody in this room not just to listen for the facts, but be in search of the feeling. So then when you're kind of paraphrasing back to somebody, I hear you saying, but you really seem like you're just really frustrated. When you attach like the issue with the feeling, it just makes people feel heard. And so again, students and adults alike. So these are some quick strategies. I don't have time to, you guys can bring me in to do a workshop with your staff. I don't have time to go over all of them. But paraphrasing is huge. I'll just put a little insert in here from a culturally relevant perspective. As an African American woman, as a teacher, assistant principal, et cetera, when I became an administrator, people would say, "You don't listen." And I said, "I just heard everything you said." And I could, regurgitate pretty much what they said. At least I thought I did. Because in my community, the concept of paraphrasing it's an unnatural pattern. It's an unnatural like language pattern. When, I'll just be frank, when Black people talk to each other, no one is saying, "So I heard you say blah, 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 blah," and then you add on. You just talk and they talk and then you interrupt and then they talk. And so sometimes in our roles, and we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but sometimes our students don't necessarily look like us or come from the backgrounds that we come from. Our staff, same thing. And so we have to have that adaptability, right? I had to learn as a principal of a predominantly white staff that for my staff to feel like I was listening to them, I had to physically bring out a notepad, write down what I heard people saying, say it back to them, and then add on, whatever I needed to say. And then I was told later, "Oh, you're such a good listener." And I chuckle in my head because I'm like, I was doing the same thing even before I did this, but it was the perception of, right? So again, in our roles as leaders, when we're talking about making it right, the adjustments come from us. And so those are like real subtle things that you can do to kind of promote listening and taking it all in. I like to summarize. You meet with a parent, you meet with a student. Most people in the meeting, and everybody assumes we're all on the same page. And I don't know about you, but I have been in so many meetings where I thought we all heard the same thing, only to find out that we were on two different planets, okay? Do not skip this step, okay? No matter what role you're in. If you're teaching, the exit ticket is what did you learn today, right? Some accountability into like what actually occurred today, a closing ritual that summarizes what happened in the meeting, who's responsible, next steps. You know, if you say homework is page 20 on page 22, I see you guys tomorrow. That is not a recap. That is not summarizing, okay? And so, again, be very intentional about that. And these are all active listening strategies. And this is what happens too. You get a chance to catch what people misheard, or you get a chance to clarify what someone didn't hear. And again, when you study this kind of language piece deeply in the words that change minds, I'll tell you guys this quickly. She says, when you're communicating, three things happen: distort, delete, generalization. So I am in this room right now. What I'm saying is being distorted, generalized, or deleted because it's just the nature of our brain. We can only hold on to so much information at a time. So, what does that mean to me as a teacher? What does that mean to me as a therapist, a counselor, an admin? If I know that that's happening, I'm going to be working very differently, strategically, trying to reinforce in as many ways possible and not just say, well, I taught it yesterday. Didn't y'all learn it? No, because delete, distort, and generalize happen. Okay? That's some wisdom for you, okay? And that has changed my life. The step between listening and responding is acknowledging constraints, emotions, problems, contributions, sometimes history, and or concerns. And then obviously our tone and our body language communicates a piece. We are wrapping up, and I'm going to get us through this last part. This is the final P, okay? This is the creative problem solving. This is how we get to the product that we're ultimately after. I'll just focus on this center one, but what can we create together that brings us to where we want to be? We can't change the past. You're a new principal. I was the third principal in 4 years, so I can relate to what you're experiencing, right? I cannot go back in time, but we can together decide what is the ideal scenario for the future, okay? So what can leaders do to make it right? We can come together about our desired future. What do we want to see? What would we see and envision 2 years from now, a year from now, a month from now, a week from now, right? This is where we want to be. So these types of prompts, you're going to bring people along with you. If you have a difficult student or a difficult parent and you say, what do we both care about? Imagine the softness of that conversation versus like, you know, your child is really, you know, he's disruptive, she's disruptive. A very different tone is set when you ask a question like this, right? This is what I want us to be conscious of. So, beneath every behavior, there is a feeling. Beneath each feeling is a need. When we meet the need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom, okay? So again, this is just another piece of promoting in search of the needs. We will not have time, but this all is linked into the presentation, but these are real strategies to build inclusive communities, real strategies as leaders or teacher leaders, things that you can do with adults, community norms. I mentioned this concept of like a closing ritual. Like, how do we open? Every meeting I open up with, I start with a community connector. Every meeting I end with an appreciation. It sets a tone, right? We need to bring people along with us in our roles. Remember that data I showed you guys about people leaving the field? What's happening to our teens? What's happening to our industry as a whole? If we're conscious of these things, I really believe our environments will be safer, they'll be more nurturing, and again, that push and pull that I was talking about can happen. Open forum agendas, just listening, right? A lot of times we walk in, we got to get from A to B. When do we just say, you know what, close your computers, let's sit in circle and talk, right? That changes the game for our environments. All right, co-construct agendas. What do you want to talk about? Cool, got it. What you want to talk about? Cool, got it. It builds the buy-in, right? And then now we walk through those pieces. Same thing could be done. You take a Friday, we're gonna take 15 minutes class, right? What do you guys want to talk about? Where are we? Imagine, they'd be like, oh my God, he's so cool, right? It's gonna happen because you're leveraging that. You're opening up yourself at not just trying to get from A to Z. And that's our daily lives, is pushing through things, right? So in closing, this is the summary. Remember I said do not end a meeting, right? I'm gonna model for you all. You want to create the conditions for community. We did a little bit of that with the M&M game, the mindful moment. You want to set those tones. You want to be mindful of your 4 Ps, right? When anytime you're approaching something, be mindful of those pieces. Engage even your most difficult folks, right? And then conflict is the result of unmet needs. And then again, I just encourage you all to develop your emotional intelligence. That's your awareness, being in tune, paying attention. Pay attention to your students, pay attention to your staff and your families. And again, we can make it right in our schools. So I went quick. I'm gonna ask you guys either, you have some choices. I'm gonna ask you either on an index card to just write down something that you took away from today. If you are live streaming, you could pass that out for me. If you are live streaming with us, if you want to drop it in the chat. But if you wouldn't mind, just something, a leadership strategy that you took away. If that modality does not work for you, I also have several workshop resources in here, but I have an evaluation also in here, and I believe, I didn't put the QR code, but I have an evaluation in here as well, and you can document it in that way. So I know we went quick. I was trying to be mindful of your time. I'm trying to read the room. But just really think about any of your key takeaways for this afternoon, and then we will dismiss shortly. Awesome. So I just want you guys to know what's in the presentation, but I have some community building prompts. If you're into restorative circles, we have those prompts there. I do encourage to do these with adults, not just children. Some mindful moment prompts, some active listening sims. These are all live in the workshop presentation. And if you want to stay in touch with me or you want to have me come and consult, I do a little bit of everything. I'm local, so I'd be happy to come and work with you or your teams. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on everything, okay? But you guys are welcome to join me on Restorative School Leadership on LinkedIn. And then these are all of my social media accounts if you want to stay in touch. And principal to principal, I'd be happy to come and chat with you. I got your back, girl. I've been there. I've been on the road you on. So thank you. You guys can leave the index cards on your table. If you have a moment later in your day, if you would like to do the evaluation, I would love for you to do the evaluation. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.